A sealed letter, a locked room, and 7 African generals in full dress uniform waiting. They called it a unity meeting, but it smelled like a trap. When President Ibrahim Traoré steps into that room, he's not just defending Burkina Faso, he's about to confront a secret military alliance prepared to sacrifice African freedom for foreign money. They gave him an ultimatum, he gave them something none of them expected. The real question is, when the people rise for truth, will their own leaders stand with them, or sell them out to silence? Tune into Courageous Voices for a story that will ignite your spirit. The conference hall smelled of leather chairs, stale cologne, and betrayal. Behind the thick curtains of the recent blue in Dakar, Senegal, 7 African generals sat in silence, not as comrades, but as gatekeepers. Each man bore stars on his shoulders and scars from wars they never fully explained. Most were graduates of Western military academies, St. Cyr, Sandhurst, Fort Benning, men who had learned to salute in French before they spoke in their mother tongues. Officially, it was a meeting on regional stability. Unofficially, it was a tribunal. The subject, a 35-year-old captain from Burkina Faso, too bold, too unbought, and far too dangerous to the status quo. Ibrahim Traoré had become more than a transitional leader. In whispers across barracks and markets, they were already calling him a symbol that terrified them. General Aduwu of Nigeria sipped coffee as he read the final draft of the ultimatum. General Ouattara of Côte d'Ivoire tapped his cane nervously. None of them wanted to be the first to admit it aloud, but they all felt the same: the gold was no longer safe, not in the hands of someone who spoke of sovereignty like it was oxygen. Traoré had shut down French military bases, he had started stockpiling gold, refusing CFA instructions, he had even, God forbid, declared that Africa must stand alone or never stand at all. They had tried silence, they had tried slander, now they would try unity. The generals agreed on one thing: Traoré would either bend to their collective will or be broken. The invitation was sent under the pretense of cooperation, but beneath the seal was something ancient and cold, fear dressed as protocol. The trap was set, and they prayed the captain was naive enough to walk into it. Want to know how Traoré turned the tables? Stay with Courageous Voices for the shocking truth. The letter arrived sealed in gold trim, marked urgent Pan-African defense dialogue. Its language was polished, diplomatic, promises of regional unity, cooperation, peace, but Ibrahim Traoré had read too many of these to believe the ink. Still, he went, not because he trusted them, but because he wanted to look them in the eyes. The suite in Dakar was lavish, the kind of place built to silence resistance. 7 generals waited, each rising slowly as he entered. They greeted him like a brother, but their hands were cold. General Aduwu extended a leather folder across the table. No prelude, no masks. Inside, the words were blunt: Traoré was to announce his resignation within 30 days. In exchange, they'd ensure a peaceful transition, no sanctions, no bloodshed. They spoke of stability, investor confidence, and avoiding civil unrest, but every word reeked of foreign ink and offshore accounts. You've become inconvenient, muttered General Ouattara, not even meeting his eyes. Traoré looked around the room. These weren't soldiers anymore, they were salesmen for silence, men who had forgotten the sound of loyalty unbought. Behind their ribbons were promises they had made to foreign powers. Traoré's refusal to bow had threatened the balance, not just of power, but of profit. For a moment, the room fell into thick, unnatural quiet. Then Traoré stood. His voice didn't rise, it didn't tremble, but every syllable landed like a match in dry grass. You ask me to surrender not for peace, but so you may continue selling pieces of Africa under new names. A few eyes narrowed, others looked away. Traoré stepped forward, hand on the folder. You didn't summon me to a peace summit, you invited me to my own funeral. And then he smiled. Let's begin the eulogy, shall we? Traoré didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to. His presence did what the room full of medals could not: command silence. He pushed the ultimatum folder aside and stood slowly, as if rising not just for himself, But for every village left in darkness while their minerals lit up foreign cities, Africa is not poor, he began. Eyes locked on the generals, she is being robbed every day in broad daylight with our consent. The room stiffened, he named names, companies with oil contracts in Chad that built no roads, corporations mining lithium in Mali while schools collapsed, French and Canadian firms exporting uranium from Niger powering Europe while Niamey suffers blackouts, gold from Burkina Faso shines in Dubai and Geneva, yet my people drink from rusted wells, every word sliced through layers of carefully curated silence. He wasn't theorizing, he was indicting. Do not call it aid when they take 10 and return 1. Do not call it partnership when we wear the uniform and they hold the leash. One general shifted in his chair, another tapped his fingers, hiding the tremor, but Traoré continued, they don't fear our guns, they fear our awareness, because the moment the African child realizes she was never born broken, the empire cracks. A pause, no one breathed. You say I destabilize? No. Gentlemen, the truth destabilizes lies, dignity destabilizes dependency. You've mistaken your foreign pensions for peace. There was nothing left to hide behind now, no flag, no title, no anthem could drown the weight of what he had said, not a speech, a reckoning. And if I am to be removed for saying this, he said, stepping back, let them do it openly, but I will not die with their gold in my mouth. Silence answered him. Traoré stepped forward, his gaze cutting through the thick air like a blade through silk. He placed no notes before him, just his hands open, bare, unshaking. You call me reckless, he said, voice firm. So was Sankara, so was Lumumba, not because they failed, but because they dared. A flicker passed through General Adewu's face. He had trained in Belgium, he knew the truth behind Lumumba's death, but had never spoken it aloud. Thomas Sankara told us to produce what we consume. For that, he was buried in a borrowed coffin. Patrice Lumumba said, our land was not for sale. They found his body, but not his teeth. The silence thickened. No one interrupted. They were not perfect, but they were pure in intention, and for that, they were silenced, not by bullets, but by betrayal wrapped in uniforms that looked like ours, cameras hidden behind the foe. Potted plants blinked red. The speech was being streamed by one of Traoré's aides. The generals had agreed to allow recording, assuming it would capture his submission. Instead, it was capturing his defiance. I don't speak to convince you, Traoré continued. I speak so history won't ask where I was when Africa bled. He lifted his chin. If I fall, may my blood water the tree, the same tree they tried to burn when they murdered Sankara, the same tree they choked when Lumumba screamed in a cage. That tree is alive. It grows in every child who knows the anthem, but not the chains. The room didn't shift, the men did. What had started as a peace talk was becoming something else, not a rebellion, not yet a reckoning, and every man in that room had to decide, was he the ghost or the grave? Traoré walked to the far end of the table and pulled a rolled-up map from his coat. He laid it across the polished wood, smoothing it with his palm like a surgeon exposing a wound. It was not a map of borders, but of foreign military bases. Here, he said, pointing, U.S. drone stations in Agadez, French command posts in Gao, Turkish training grounds in Somalia, Chinese naval ports along the coast, each one perfectly placed, not near schools, not near famine zones, but near mines, near oil fields, near gold. The room stared in uneasy silence. They say the West protects us, he said, but they build bases near our minerals, not our mothers. They offer rifles, not respirators. Who are they protecting? He pulled another sheet marked with airspace violations, drones, surveillance craft, special ops helicopters crossing African skies without clearance. No outrage, no sanction. Not even a whisper from ECOWAS. Do you think if a Burkinabe drone flew over Paris, it would go unnoticed? A few generals exchanged glances. One cleared his throat, but said nothing. Traoré pressed on. You call it partnership, I call it occupation, not by force, but by invitation. You've mistaken presence for power, but they are not here because we're weak, they're here because we're rich, just not in our own pockets. He looked each man in the eye, daring them to flinch. They speak of counter-terrorism, but the terrorists often arrive after the contracts are signed. They say they protect us from chaos, but what if chaos is the price they pay to keep Africa on its knees? He tapped the table once, sharp, final. So I ask again, whose security are they defending? No one answered, and the silence spoke louder than any treaty ever signed. Traoré paused, letting the silence settle like dust before he reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim folder bound in plain cloth. He set it on the table with quiet finality. You came here expecting my surrender, he said, but what I bring is a blueprint. He opened the folder and turned it toward the generals. Inside were charts, documents, and a proposal stamped with the seal of the transitional government of Burkina Faso. We are launching our own gold reserve system. No longer will our wealth be shipped to vaults in Zurich or Paris while our people queue for grain. Every ounce mined will be logged, stored, and audited publicly. A few eyebrows lifted. This wasn't rhetoric, it was policy. We've partnered with African universities from Accra to Addis Ababa to build a research and development alliance. We will train our scientists, not rent them. We will patent our medicines, not beg for vaccines. He flipped another page. A youth corps is being formed, not to fight wars engineered by foreign powers, but to build roads, irrigation, and clinics. Our youth will not be trained to shoot their brothers for foreign applause, they will be trained to build what colonialism left in ruin. Some generals looked away, others studied the pages as if seeing a forbidden text. Traoré leaned in, lowering his voice. They said Burkina Faso was landlocked, but we are people linked. We are not a colony, we are not a pit, we are not a battlefield, we are a nation, and we will act like one. And the words hung heavy in the room, not as a threat, but prophecy. He had not just rejected their ultimatum, he had made them irrelevant, and in that moment, some realized they were no longer the future he was. Traoré stepped back from the table, his hands no longer gesturing, but still, as if holding something sacred. His eyes swept across the room, not with anger, but with the gravity of a man who had already made peace with the storm ahead. I know what you think, he said quietly, that this will bring chaos, that if we refuse the old path, we'll fall into ruin. He paused, then shook his head. You're wrong. He let the silence stretch before breaking it like glass. Africa is not dying, he said, she is in labor. The words echoed strange and unfamiliar in a room built for control, and like every birth, he continued, there will be blood, there will be screaming, there will be breath, but after the pain, there is life. No one moved. We are not watching a continent collapse, we are witnessing a continent become conscious of itself. The old order fears that moment more than any war, because when Africa awakens, no summit, no sanction, no foreign base will be enough to put her back to sleep. One general, General Bo from Ghana, swallowed hard, blinking slowly. The certainty he had walked in with was slipping through his fingers. Traoré's voice dropped to a whisper. You cannot colonize a people who've remembered their worth. You can only delay them, you can only distract them, but when their memory returns, when their spine straightens, when their children begin to ask why, the empire ends. He stepped away from the table as if the trial were over and the verdict delivered. I am not asking for your permission, I am planting a flag, and history will judge who stood with the mother and who stood with her chains. Not a threat, a prophecy, and no one dared refute it. By dawn, the speech had leaked, not through official press, but through grainy cell phone footage uploaded by a junior aide, shaky with adrenaline, but clear enough to ignite a continent. Within hours, it spread like fire on dry harmattan wind. TikTok cuts with Sankara's music under Traoré's words, Twitter threads dissecting each sentence, WhatsApp chains translating it into Lingala, Swahili, Wolof, Hausa. In Bamako, students painted Africa is in labor across the university walls. In Ouagadougou, thousands gathered in the square before the sun rose, chanting his name like a heartbeat. Kinshasa erupted with flash rallies, young men holding gold-painted shovels in the air, not weapons, symbols. Inside the polished military halls where power once moved in quiet murmurs, panic broke the silence. The generals called emergency meetings, phones rang non-stop, embassies issued warnings, avoid gatherings, remain indoors. We advise caution in West Africa, but caution couldn't hold back a movement with memory. By mid-afternoon, the U.S. State Department released a cautious statement about respecting democratic transitions. France was quieter, its officials meeting behind locked doors, and then came Harvard, once eager to host Traoré at its upcoming Global Governance Forum. The university released a cold, clipped statement due to unforeseen scheduling conflicts. President Traoré will no longer be joining our panel, but it was too late. The footage had reached Nairobi, Lagos, Dar, Johannesburg even. School children were repeating his words. The generals had gathered to make him irrelevant. Instead, they had made him inevitable. They had underestimated not his army, but his voice, and now that it had entered the bloodstream of the continent, no embargo, no disinvitation, no diplomatic insult could silence it. The question was no longer, will they stop him? It was, can they stop what he's already started? The backlash began with a carefully worded email from the Dean of Global Affairs. What had once been a glowing invitation to President Ibrahim Traoré was now reduced to a formal rebuke. The speech, the statement read, was unproductive, divisive, and incompatible with the spirit of academic neutrality. But the students had seen the footage. They had heard the fire in his voice when he said, "Africa is not dying, she is in labor," and they had cheered, not in protest, but in recognition. Clips went viral. Applause erupting from lecture halls as Traoré's speech played over projectors. A Ghanaian student at the Kennedy School stood and declared, "We are no longer case studies, we are revolutions in progress." The room stood with her. Then came the resignations. Dr. Elias Mensah, a tenured professor of African political economy, submitted his letter first. If truth is divisive, then Harvard has sided with comfort over courage, he wrote. 3 others followed. One left his office unlocked with a note taped to the door. Lumumba was killed for less. Outside, the protest began at Harvard Yard. African students and allies set up tents in silence. No chants, just signs. Curriculum not equal to colonialism. Invite the people, not the puppets. He spoke. Now you hide. Some began hunger strikes, not for publicity, but for memory, to reclaim the narrative, to demand the stories of Africa be told, not in past tense, not in pity, but in power. Harvard tried to ignore it, but ignoring a wound doesn't heal it. The dean's face appeared on campus posters beneath a single quote from Traoré, "You can only delay them, but when their memory returns." No one needed the rest of the sentence. Everyone knew how it ended. The generals reconvened under urgent protocol, this time in Abidjan, hoping to salvage the illusion of unity. The plan was swift: issue sanctions on Burkina Faso, freeze development aid, block regional trade routes. It would be clean, quiet, decisive. But then something cracked. Guinea's delegate, under quiet instruction from Kuka's Youth Council, refused to sign. "We will not sanction a man for telling the truth," he said. Minutes later, Mali followed. The hall fell into chaos. Papers shuffled, phones buzzed, whispers flew across the table like insects trapped in heat. The block that once moved like a single machine had become noise and splinters, and while they argued, Ouagadougou roared. Traoré returned, not under escort, but on foot. The crowd stretched for miles, children on shoulders, elders holding flags, women singing old songs they hadn't touched in decades. Red dust swirled around them like smoke from a sacred fire. The city did not just welcome him, it rose with him. He walked slowly through the capital, not behind tinted glass, but among the people. They touched his arm, they wept, some simply whispered, "You didn't lie." No guns fired, no orders shouted, and yet, across the continent, something shifted. The block did not fall in a day, but it began to fracture, not by bullets, but by memory, by dignity returning like a tide that would not recede. He had not needed an army, he had needed a sentence, and when he delivered it, "Africa is not dying, she is in labor," the world tried to smother it with silence, but the people had already heard, and once truth is born, it cannot be unborn. If this story moved you, challenged you, or opened your eyes, don't just scroll past. Like this video, subscribe to Courageous Voices, and hit the bell so you never miss a voice the world tried to silence. Drop a comment below. Should more African leaders speak like Ibrahim Traoré, or are they too afraid of the cost? Share this video with someone who still believes Africa is poor. Let them hear the truth on Courageous Voices, and if you're watching from anywhere on the continent, type your country. Below, let's show the world that Africa is awake.